I guess there's something going on the other side, right? Okay. Okay, I'm delighted to be with my colleagues, Senators Reid and Cardin and Shaheen. Now, this week, as many are focused on the chaos in the House, to wit, the Senate will continue to work to deliver for the American people and stand with our friends and allies across the globe. The future of democracy around the world faces its greatest threat since the end of the Cold War. At this pivotal moment in history, America is once again called upon to rise to the occasion and lead the way. And the senators here today will help us achieve that goal. President Biden has now sent Congress a supplemental funding request with aid for Israel, Ukraine, and to outcompete the Chinese government and secure our southern border from threats like fentanyl. We must pass this supplemental as soon as we can with bipartisan support for a very simple reason. It will make the world safer for the United States, our allies, and our democratic values. Democrats and Republicans alike know that if Putin, Hamas, or any of our other adversaries succeed, it would endanger every single American around the world. Now that Congress has received the President's requests, I will make it a top priority for the Senate to act swiftly, decisively, and most important, with strong bipartisan conviction. Bipartisanship must lead the way as we take up the President's supplemental request. To my Republican colleagues, I say simply, let's work together to ensure that this process remains bipartisan, because the only things that win support from both sides will make it to the President's desk. Senate Democrats and Republicans agree we must stand with Israel, so let's pass this supplemental as soon as possible. Senate Democrats and Republicans also agree we must stand with Ukraine. After all, 70 members voted for Ukraine funding last month in our CR. So let's pass the supplemental as soon as we can. And Democrats and Republicans want to outcompete the Chinese government, secure our border for threats like fentanyl, and provide humanitarian aid to minimize civilian casualties in both Israel and Gaza. All of these priorities are, indeed, bipartisan. All of these provisions are included in the President's request. So let's roll up our sleeves, get to work in the coming weeks, and pass this supplemental quickly and with strong bipartisan support. With the House Republicans in paralysis, the Senate cannot and will not wait. If we act with enough bipartisan conviction, a strong bipartisan majority here in the Senate, it will go a long way to pushing the House to getting its act together and follow suit. The world is watching us very closely, and they are looking at what actions we take in Congress over the coming weeks. We have to send an unmistakable message that our country and our allies, we must send an unmistakable message to our country, to our allies, and our adversaries that America will always spring to the defense of our allies in their hour of need. That's why we must pass this supplemental as soon as we can. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Schumer. As we all know, on October 7th, Hamas attacked the people of Israel in a barbaric and depraved attack. They killed hundreds of women and children. They took hostages, 200 men, women, and children. And after this despicable act of terror, the people of Israel, indeed all humanity, have to stand with the State of Israel. I traveled to Israel along with Ben Cardin, led by Lindsey Graham, on a bipartisan trip. We met with the families of the hostages. And just a moment in Israel, you sense the horror, the agony, the pain that they are feeling. And it's very, very real. We met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, with Yair Lapid, with Benny Gantz, and with Defense Minister Gallant. And we delivered our message of support for the people of Israel. We stand with Israel. And I must emphasize, Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas hates Israel and doesn't care about the Palestinian people. They will use them as shields. They will use them to protect their sensitive sites. So this is not a battle between the state of Israel and the people of Palestine. It's an attempt to destroy a sadistic group of terrorists. And we have an obligation to protect innocent lives that have been caught up in this. We have an obligation to work with the international community to provide, we hope, relief for the Palestinians in Gaza so that they can get out of the fighting zone, so that they can find some type of shelter and food. We're encouraged that they've opened up the humanitarian corridor. We thanked President Sisi and Prime Minister Netanyahu for their efforts to open up that corridor, so supplies are now flowing in. More must be done. And then we have to obviously assist the state of Israel in their efforts to degrade and ultimately destroy Hamas. And those efforts continue. We also had the opportunity to travel to Saudi Arabia and meet with the Crown Prince, and in Egypt with President Sisi. They are both aware of the dangers to Israel and to the Palestinians and also to the whole region of the Middle East. They want, and we encourage them, to try to lead international efforts to provide support for the Palestinian people, to provide areas of refuge, to do those things that will help the Palestinian people through this very difficult moment. The United States is committed to help Israel. We have sent forces in to deter the expansion of this war outside the boundaries of Israel and Gaza. Our aircraft carriers, our aircraft, they're designed to send a signal that no nation in that region should try to take advantage of this terrible moment. And of course, we have to pass the $14.3 billion to Israel. That is necessary support. It will allow them to protect themselves and also to signal again to the region that they are ready to take on any other potential axes of attack, and that will be a deterrent effect too. We will remain steadfast in our support to Israel.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Cardin.
Well, first, Senator Schumer, thank you for your leadership during these extremely challenging times and for the manner in which we will be considering the supplemental appropriation. And to my colleague, Senator Reid, the two of us shared something that we thought we would never see in our lifetime, the depravity and brutality that Hamas demonstrated against Israel. What we saw in videos, in film, and faces, conversations with the families of the hostages, it brought depravity to a new low against civilization. It just shocks you to see what they did to people and what they're continuing to do. We were resolved to help Israel. That feeling is even deeper today as a result of our visit. Israel has a right and obligation to defend itself. Hamas must be destroyed. It's evil. The Palestinians cannot survive with Hamas. It's in their interest. We call it Hamas to be similar to ISIS. I personally think some of the things they did is even worse than what ISIS did. We have to rid that region and the world from such a terrorist organization. In doing that, we have to provide the help Israel needs. This supplemental does that. It provides additional resources for air defense. We know how many missiles were shot against Israel, and we know that Iron Dome was successful in bringing down most of them. They need to have the resources to protect themselves against another round of missile attacks. Senator Reid mentioned properly, we're doing everything we can to stop the spread of this conflict. I want to congratulate President Biden for his strong leadership. We heard that over and over again in Israel, the strength of American leadership under President Biden. We've made it clear to Iran and its proxies that it should not even consider taking advantage of this circumstances against Israel. We recognize the risks from the northern border with Hezbollah. Israel needs to be prepared. This supplemental is critically important so that they have the defense if more missiles are fired into the country. It also provides the resources in order to even perfect air defense greater than it is today. It provides the resources for America to replenish its own supplies that it's made available to Israel. And yes, as Senator Reid says, it provides the help for the innocent victims being caught in this conflict. I was impressed in my conversations with the Israelis, their sensitivity, as I knew was there, to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the innocent victims, the Palestinians that are trying to leave. Hamas is trying to stop them. Hamas is using them as shields, human shields. We need to do everything we can to help, including the supply of humanitarian assistance. We're pleased to see the trucks are getting in, and we hope they're not being diverted. In this supplemental is help for Ukraine. Ukraine needs this money yesterday. We've got to get that done immediately. That's our front line in defense against Russia's aggression to bring down democratic Europe. We need to make sure they have the resources they need and the leadership from America to keep this strong coalition together, to give them the resources they need. And in the Indo-Pacific, we have to make it clear to the PRC, to China, that they cannot use aggression. And one way to do that is to show China that we stand with the democratic regimes that are in the region and are prepared to give them what they need to defend their territorial integrity. This is a critical moment for the United States and the free world. This supplemental is critically important that we get it done as soon as possible to support democracy around the world. I'll do everything I possibly can to get this supplemental passed.
Finally, last but certainly not least, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. I'm pleased to join my colleagues and to support the sentiments that they have already echoed, particularly framing it the way Senator Cardin just did. This supplemental bill is about whether we're going to be on the side of the civilized world or on the side of those terrorist organizations, those autocratic dictators who represent depravity. In its entirety, this package would bolster our own national security in so many ways. As Ukrainians and Israelis fight against terror and destruction, it's important that the United States continues to step up and support them. Last year, I met with a group of Ukrainian women soldiers, and one of the things they said to me has stuck with me. They said, "Give us the weapons so that we can fight the Russians so that you don't have to." Well, this morning I met with one of those women again, a soldier named Adriana. She was critically injured last year because she was in a civilian vehicle and Ukraine doesn't have enough armored cars to protect themselves from Russian attacks. The vehicle she was in was hit by a Russian mine. She was traumatically injured, spent 9 months in the hospital. She had to learn to walk again. She walked into my office today. And what she told me is that she intends to return to the fight. She's going back to her unit. And we talked about why. And she said, because Ukraine is fighting for its life. In fact, we joked about the fact that Ukraine's motto is very much like New Hampshire's motto. You know, I'm from the live free or die state. Well, Ukraine's motto is freedom or death. And she said, we're in a fight right now for freedom, and we're willing to die for that freedom. As President Zelensky said when he was here, he said, the United States is giving money and weapons, and we are giving lives. If we let the destructive authoritarian leaders like Putin dictate the future of sovereign countries, if we let terrorist organizations like Hamas determine what we're going to do in the free world, we are going to all lose that battle. That's why I strongly support continued assistance to Ukraine. And make no mistake, our adversaries, whether it's China or Iran, are watching how we respond to the war in Ukraine. They are watching what we do in the Middle East with Israel. It's why this request for the supplemental includes support for Taiwan in the face of the aggression of the PRC. Our enduring support for Ukraine sends a strong message to other dictators that the United States is going to stand on the side of democracy. And there is a nexus between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel. If we're concerned about Iran, we need to support Ukraine and Israel and the supplemental, because there have been reports that Iran, which already supplies Russia with lethal drones that they're using in Ukraine, is also backing Hamas, as we all know, in their brutal campaign of terror. So I know that my colleagues have talked at great length about the steadfast support for Israel, and I would just echo their sentiments entirely. Last, I want to raise one issue that's also part of the supplemental that's about our own security, and that's what's happening at the border. The President's request would add 1,300 Border Patrol agents, 375 immigration judge teams, and 1,600 asylum officers. It would fund over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect fentanyl. And for those of us who live in states that are still being dramatically affected by the opioid epidemic and by fentanyl, that is an investment that is absolutely critical to try and get the fentanyl epidemic under control. So the world is watching what we're doing. I hope that as a Congress we're going to step up in a bipartisan way and pass this supplemental and show the world that we are on the side of fighting oppression, of fighting dictators, of fighting terrorist organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, my three excellent colleagues. Yes, lady over there.
Senator Thune was just saying he believes that the border piece of the supplemental should have changes to policy, not just more money, especially about asylum, changing asylum.
First and above all, anything done on border has to be bipartisan, or the whole supplemental will get bollocksed up. I believe that Senator Biden's proposal, which is funding, will do the most to get us at the fentanyl crisis that Jean talked about and dealing with the problems at the border. We are not for policy changes. Yes.
With the supplemental now, is there any chance you can pass all the appropriation bills before November 17th, or will you definitely have a CR?
Look, we're doing our very best. We reached agreement, as you may have heard this morning, on the 3 supplemental bills that have come up. They will be, once they pass, and they will pass, the only bipartisan bills passed. The House has passed 4 bills. They're totally partisan. They're filled with poison pills. They go way below the agreements that were made previously, and they're non-starters. So we're going to do everything we can to pass as many of the bills as we can. Yes?
The federal deficit just hit a record outside of the COVID years. Do you have any concerns about more spending at a time like this?
Well, the bottom line is that we Democrats have done more in terms of reduction of deficit than others. In the IRA, for instance, for every dollar we spent, we saved $1. I've never seen the Republicans do that when they do tax cuts. Yes, Bolton.
Since 2021, the Biden administration has tried to restore or revive elements of the JCPOA with Iran through Qatar and intermediaries. Would you like to see the Biden administration make a course correction in terms of diplomatic outreach to Iran?
My position on the JCPOA is clear. I voted against it early on because I think one of the main reasons is it didn't have enough to deter Iran from funding terrorism around the globe, and I still believe that. Yes?
What about people crossing the border, dangerous people? There was this memo out that your colleague Senator Daines showed from Border Patrol San Diego that Hezbollah, Hamas, you're talking a lot about fentanyl, which is a problem. What about the
best thing to do is pass the Biden proposal on the border. It will do more to stop the problems of fentanyl and other issues than any other. Thank you, everybody.
That U.S. forces have been attacked 13 times in the last